Hi, we're here today with Peter Worrell. He's the CEO of Bigelow LLC, an M&A advisory firm. And he's also recently published a book entitled Enterprise Value. Peter, can you please give us some background on you and your firm?
Sure. The firm was founded in the 1930s by Nathaniel Bigelow. We're an M&A firm with a specialty in entrepreneur, owner-managers exclusively. So we work only with people who have their own capital at risk. We're what you would call a sell-side only M&A firm. So we don't do anything else, no raising capital, no, we don't work on the buy side. And we work agnostically as to industry, and we work all over the country.
Great. And Peter, I want to talk a little bit about your book. So you say that selling one's enterprise is a creative art form. Can you touch on that?
Sure. Well, these are people, as we just mentioned, who have their capital at risk in an entity that they might have founded, or it might be a family entity that their families owned for a long time, or it could be an entity that they own with some institutional investors. But in any one of those three cases, it's something that usually their personal identity, their sense of self-worth is all tied up in this entity, along with their financial outcome. And so we think of it, Paula, in a way of speaking about it, as what we're trying to do is help them to acquire the next majority owner for their business, an owner that will sustain the business beyond their personal ownership of it so far.
And now, what can a business owner do to leave a positive legacy after an exit?
So business owners frequently have a great positive impact on all the stakeholders around them, perhaps more than they even frequently know. Many times they have hired many of the people in their management team and in the firm. Many times those people have spouses and families and talk about the business together a lot. And so those people provide hopefully a great work ethic and a great outcome for the families who work with them. But also, if I name to you a couple of names of families, let me ask you to guess what these names represent. If I said to you Gates, Buffett, Rockefeller, Lilly, Hewlett, Packard, Johnson, what would you guess those names are?
Technology or innovation.
Great entrepreneurs, right?
Sure.
And of course they are, but they're also among the 10 largest charitable foundations in the world. So you see, those entrepreneur owner-managers created organizations, yes, and they created great enterprise value, yes, but then to the largest extent, that enterprise value went to fund the not-for-profit social sector in North America. So that's what I mean by a great outcome.
Sure. And now I also want to talk about a recent transaction that you've worked on.
Sure.
Can you please briefly tell us about an interesting transaction you've worked on?
Sure. We worked on a transaction recently, which was a company in the industrial filtration business. So this is a company that makes water filtration for industrial processes, really large filtration equipment, so as large as this room. And the company was started 30 years ago by an Englishman who worked in a number of process industries and realized, wow, a lot of these industries have a constraint of either not being able to get enough water or they're concerned about releasing dirty water back into the environment. So he designed with his team a way to have industrial water filtration, both the equipment and also the filtration. And we were able to structure a negotiation that allowed him to choose from the best handful of strategic acquirers in the world and the best handful of private equity investors in the world. He ultimately decided to choose a private equity investor, a firm from Los Angeles, who had great interest in the industrial filtration area, and in fact had an operating partner who really was familiar with that area. And so that transaction closed about 6 months ago, and I just spoke to my friend Barry, who's delighted with the outcome and couldn't be happier about the future of the business.
That's great.
Yeah.
And can you tell us about some of the parties that were involved in this transaction and how you were able to work together?
Yeah, there were a lot of them. So we were initially referred to the business by its commercial banker. The commercial banker had been the commercial banker for the company for a really long time. I think it was one of those situations where the banker was having a beer with the owner one night and the owner said, boy, I don't know what I'm going to do about this business. someday I'd really like to think about who's going to be the next owner. And in addition, he had another concern, which is he has a 32-year-old learning disabled son who he wants to provide for the rest of his life. In the back of his mind, he was thinking, wow, I really better get some chips off the table someday. We were able to help him find an M&A attorney who is from a world-class firm. This one happens to be in the East Coast. And we were able to help him work with also an accounting and tax advisor, and ultimately a wealth advisor, to help he and his wife and their son develop some estate planning devices that allow them to put the enterprise value to great use.
And how do you choose the team that you work with?
Well, that's a great question. We used to, back in the bad old days, be very cautious, be very careful with our clients, because, of course, all of our clients already have a lawyer, they already have an accountant, they have these advisors. But it's not typical that these advisors are expert in these large M&A transactions. So we have, over the years, become more bold to say to our prospective clients before we get engaged, hey, let's talk about the team. Let's talk about the team that's going to surround you as the entrepreneur, owner, manager in the middle. And let's talk about, for example, do we need to have a great entity deal tax person? And if we have one, in this case, she was a person who was a partner in a national firm who was able to clarify so many things so quickly for us. It was just of great value. Or let's think about who your wealth advisor is. And are there some things that can be done in advance of the transaction to help you along the way? So we are now quite forward about making sure that our clients have thought about these advisors in advance.
Great. And Peter, what was the most challenging aspect of this transaction?
It fell apart. On the Sunday after Thanksgiving, I got a call from the CEO of the strategic investor that we had originally picked. And he said, Pete, I'm awfully sorry to give you this phone call, but we're not going to make our quarterly profits. And you probably know it's my first year as CEO. And the reason we're not going to make our profit number is because of an acquisition we made last year. And I know we're supposed to do this transaction, and I'm so sorry, but there's no way I'm going to bet my career on telling our board we're going to go forward with this transaction when I really need to get my act together and clean up this old one. So our team swung into action on that Sunday afternoon. We had a firm-wide meeting at Bigelow, and we asked ourselves, what are we going to do? How are we going to go back to the market and think about who could step into the shoes of this investor? So the most challenging thing was to really pull that back together very quickly when we were only 2 weeks away from closing, and to be able to do a transaction that I think if you ask the owner, he would tell you he's as happy with, in some ways more happy than probably he was with the first one.
And now, how did you source that final investor?
This was a private equity firm in Los Angeles that I mentioned, and we had a number of dialogues with them over the years about what specifically vertical industries they were interested in, and one of them was filtration. And so, I have a partner who lives in Seattle. This firm is in Los Angeles, and he said, you know, I remember that Rich told me that he was always interested in industrial filtration. I'm just going to pick up the phone and call him, because this is such an unusual situation where, you know, Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and went into 1,000 pieces. And what we were basically saying was, if you would like to step into the shoes of the investor who fell off the wall, the deal is almost all negotiated. So really, if you're willing to step into the shoes, we can do this very quickly and with very little competition for you, which we were able to do.
That's great. And Peter, I have one last question for you. Are there any interesting takeaways or any lessons learned from this deal?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. I think probably one of the things we didn't do as well as we could have was we didn't prep our clients' management team as well as we could have on how challenging it was going to be to explain the business to a private equity investor, to a really skillful, qualified, experienced private equity investor who wasn't from the industry. And so we probably could have done a better job on that, and we'll do a better job on that in the future. And I think the other thing was probably that this client made a decision that he wanted to find a new majority owner pretty quickly. And as you may know, in our practice, we frequently have months or years in advance of a transaction where we are working with our owner-manager clients to kind of help them build value along the way. That's the other thing I wish we could have done here, because there's a few things, not just window dressing, a few substantial things we could have done that probably would have made the business a tiny bit better.
What do you think those things were?
Oh, I think they had to do with, for example, when you look at the business, if you looked at the business with me, you would agree that they were thin in their marketing channels and their sales management. And the reason is because the owner-manager was so powerful in selling. He knew the technology, he knew the customers so well. But when he made a decision to transition out, that was quite obviously going to be a hole. And it's a hole that the private equity firm can and will fill, but it could have been a hole that he could have filled in advance.
Sure.
And probably could have realized some additional enterprise value for that.
Very interesting. Pete, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today.
Fun to be with you.
Thank you.